everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, hello everyone and welcome. I'm Lindsay LeBoyer, Exhibitions Associate here at LMCC, and I'm delighted to be moderating this talk with Simon Benjamin as part of the Take Care series here at the Arts Center. Just want to remind everyone that we have a short activity at the end of the talk, so I encourage you to stay for that. And to start it off, I'm going to introduce Simon. Simon Benjamin is a Jamaican artist and filmmaker based in New York. His current body of work uses the sea and coastal space as frameworks to explore how lesser-known histories and colonial legacies impact our present and contribute to an interconnected future. He has recently shown work at Documenta 15 in Kassel, Germany, and the Kingston Biennial at the National Gallery of Jamaica. He has participated in residencies at Lighthouse Works on Fisher's Island, Shandaken projects here on Governor's Island, and in 2021, he was an LMCC artist in residence at the Arts Center. And in May of 2023, he'll have his debut solo gallery show at Baxter Street, CCNY. Before we get into the talk, we want to acknowledge that today's event is happening on the ancestral lands of the Lenape people. We are situated on the Lenape island of Pagank, or Nut Island, today known as Governor's Island, and more broadly, we're in the region of Lenape-Hoking.
We acknowledge indigenous peoples' genocide and continued displacement during the colonial era and beyond. We offer our respect to the Lenape and other indigenous caretakers of the land and waters and their elders who have lived here, who live here now, and who will continue to live here in the future. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll talk loud.
So Simon, thank you so much for being here. And could you start by telling us a little bit about this installation behind us? What are we looking at?
Well, before we even start, I should have thanked everyone at LMCC who has been super generous and helpful in bringing realize. Oh, you can hear?
Yeah.
Can you hear me better now? Okay. Maybe like a rapper. Yeah. I wanted to thank everyone, the staff at LMCC, for helping realize this project. Gabrielle Francis and Anya Freer also helped a lot with realizing the project. I'm indebted to Nate Malinowski at Lighthouse Works, where I did the residency, where the videos were made and are being made inside the Spiral Live. There's a live feed from there. And especially Lauren, Lauren also, who is not here, but Lindsay, who has sort of taken the lead at making sure the installation kind of happened while I was away in Germany for Documenta and Kingston Biennial. So there was a part of this process that was remote that was, you know, it wouldn't have happened without the dedication of Lindsay and the staff. So, and the VEAs who kind of make sure no one kicks over things or eats things or, you know.
And help to explain what's going on here. As we'll see, there's so much to unpack.
So, and with that, what we are unpacking are barrels. We have, in Jamaica, we just call them barrel. But we have shipping barrels here. They're made out of cardboard, and there are portals on the side of each shipping barrel. Within the shipping barrels, there are videos. There are two videos. One is a live feed of the Atlantic Ocean. The camera is facing in the direction of the Caribbean. And then the other is a recorded view of the sea. The black and white one is video is a recorded image I made when I was an artist in residence earlier this year at Fisher's Island. The barrels are typically used by Afro-Caribbean migrants, but I've been learning that other people use them too, African migrants. And it's like an economical way to ship things back home to loved ones, and it's sort of like a way of, you know, maintaining contact and a relationship and sort of a form of disembodied care that is extended towards family members and friends and loved ones that are away. And there, a lot of people are supported and kind of depend on barrels coming from abroad back home for survival and so on. So yeah, so that's kind of what we're looking at.
Thank you so much for just giving us a bit of a verbal explanation. And if you haven't already checked out the installation, I definitely encourage you to do that after the talk. There's some videos inside the portals that should not be missed. So just picking up on the idea of the barrels, how did you start using these barrels as portals? How did you get the idea to even do that with something that is so kind of utilitarian?
Okay, I think we can jump to the next slide. That one slide will make a little bit more sense in the end. But I started off, the barrels kind of are coming back from an earlier part of my practice. The beginnings of my current practice started with watercolor paintings. I was making watercolor paintings that were sort of representations and abstractions of swimming and surfing memories that I, was just kind of painting and just doing that for myself. And I eventually was encouraged by a friend to show them. The first time I showed them was in a taco shop in my neighborhood called Havana Outpost. I had like a little solo exhibition there. And that was on the encouragement of a friend, and who's a curator, amazing curator, Nicole Smythe Johnson. I didn't know her at the time. She kind of, in the sort of typical Jamaican way, a friend of mine who's an artist, Deborah Anzinger, asked me if I could put her up at my house because she needed a place to stay, and she stayed with me, and I had these watercolor paintings in the room that she was staying in, and then she's like, these are great, you should do something with them, and encouraged me to exhibit them. So that's sort of like the beginning of my sort of having an art practice, is having a curator drop into my house kind of casually and being like, you should make art. And so, I mean, I've always made art, but this is the kind of more formal thing. So it's another one of them that like is from like looking up underwater, like when you duck dive and go under the sea, and like, so it was these abstractions of these moments. The second,
you made these?
I made these. Okay. Yeah. I painted. I don't paint much anymore, so that question is coming from someone who's familiar with my practice. I probably will start painting again, but like yeah, why not? But this is where sort of materiality starts to kind of come in. I started working with gold leaf here. This was an exhibition in Stockholm at a hotel, like a hotel gallery. And I was responding to my surroundings there, and it's gray water, and like there's lots of grass everywhere, and kind of was the vibe. And then I had an opportunity to help out a friend who was making a new product, a water vessel, that she reached out to me and was like, hey, can you help me figure out a way to display this at this sort of design fair thing? And then I wanted to make the leap from the circles I was painting into like 3D. So I was familiar with, I didn't know how to sculpt per se, so I was looking for a form or an armature that would house the sculpture. And barrels came to mind because I was like, okay, they're familiar from Jamaica and from my own like experience in Jamaica. And I also know you can get them here in the US because they end up in Jamaica where you see them. And so I went to Caribbean neighborhood and in Garvey's Hardware in Crown Heights, and got some barrels and covered them with neoprene, which had like a soft touch. I was also very deep into surfing at the time. Neoprene is what wetsuits are made out of, so I was like thinking about water in that way, and like the relationship water, the material could have to water. And so that was the sort of first time trying to make something new. And then in 2017, I went to Haiti to do the Ghetto Biennale, which is a biennial that happens in Port-au-Prince every 2 years. And I had, after I did that project with the sort of sculptural pieces, I took off the neoprene and the barrels were sitting in my studio, and the barrels themselves, without being adorned, kind of evoked a certain sort of memory of place and like certain emotion. Different people came into the studio and like had a visceral response to them, especially Caribbean people. They're like, oh, and there's always memory associated with them. They're like a kind of mysterious object to me in certain ways where you kind of would, I remember as a child seeing them in people's houses and like not really understanding like where these were all coming from and where they were going to, and like my mom was a flight attendant, I traveled a lot, I saw there's a lot of movement around barrels, and it was something I was definitely familiar with. And so in Haiti, I responded to the prompt, the curatorial prompt, which was responding to the past, a cartography of Port-au-Prince, that's what it was, sorry. And so I made these dioramas that in the inside I had different found objects and like common materials that you'd find within Haiti. Part of the Ghetto Biennale is that you go there and you kind of have to work with what you can find. So I knew I would be able to find barrels there because of the large Haitian diaspora that is in Miami and also in New York. So we got I found barrels there and kind of got objects in there that were sort of reflecting this sort of past, present, and future of the relationship people in Haiti may have had with the sea. And a lot of this experience, I ended up using a lot of the materials I use in my work today. A lot of it comes from this experience. Shell, and next one, and then this one was I kind of used video for the first time here, and I had a projector kind of set up, and then you could kind of peek through the portal, and then there were projections on cornmeal of films that I made while I was there for the 2 weeks for the Biennale. So it's this sort of process of making things really quickly, and the cornmeal is something that has ended up in my work today. Yeah, it's like an installation view. Talked a lot, so.
No, I love how you're kind of using the barrel as a ready-made and like dressing it up a bit, and then you dress it down and realize it's actually so powerful symbolically, just the way it is. And there's a reason that you were interested in the diorama as a kind of apparatus. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the diorama I thought was interesting because in thinking about Haiti, it's impossible not to think about the Haitian Revolution and that time period, and like who was there, who was enslaved, who was not enslaved, what were the enslaved was doing in their downtime, how was entertainment working there. The diorama was invented around the time of the Haitian Revolution, and I'm sort of fabulating and sort of connecting dots that there could have been dioramas in Haiti at that time when people were living their life, and like for a certain community, and would have been excluded from, enslaved people would for sure be not able to partake. And so I was just thinking about the diorama and like what that might look like present day as a sort of French object that's sort of creolized in a way.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation. So you're kind of working with these barrels, you're getting into these themes of diaspora, and then how did you approach the opportunity to reinterpret the work that you did in Haiti here at the Arts Center? Were there any ideas that you wanted to keep evolving or continue to work out through the opportunity to kind of reinterpret that work?
Yeah. So I know from being here last year for two back-to-back residencies that was like 6 months. There are a lot of Caribbean people that pass through here to visit. There are quite a few Caribbean people who work here, so I knew I wanted to address a Caribbean audience. And so the barrels seem to make sense here. And then within this actual, I always think about the specificity of place, and like this place, which is a former armory, and was basically a container of things, which was mostly ammunition, but it kind of went through different uses. And so the idea of like bringing a container in a container was interesting. And then the beams, I wanted to kind of respond to the fact that there are these beams here, and then the idea of support and pillars kind of came to mind. And so I experimented with seeing how, if the barrels could actually act or sort of be symbolic in a way to reflect support, as the barrels kind of function in the Caribbean as like a support system for people, but also it's a supports and sort of reinforces sort of social conditions as well as economic conditions. So I like the idea of the barrel becoming this metaphor. So that was a connection I really wanted to focus on. Yeah. I love that there is this duality, like you have the pillars acting as a literal diorama, and then you have the symbolic nature of them, and that's always something I try to emphasize when I'm showing people the installation. And just to pick up on what you were saying about a container within a container, and thinking about the experience of being on the island, I was noticing when I take the ferry over, you can kind of see Castle Williams on the edge of the island, and that is kind of like this barrel shape, this military era structure with these little holes in it. And so there is really like this this repetition of the forms that is so beautiful when you come into the art center. And the installation is it really calibrates you for this building, and kind of it just is this great endpoint to the experience of coming over from Manhattan to Governor's Island. So you've been exploring these relationships through your practice and the many residencies that you've done on many islands. So could you tell us a little bit about those residencies? The one, you were artist in resident here, and then you did the residency at Fisher's Island, which I know was really impactful on this work. So could you talk about how that environment influenced your work and your research? Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, so in the beginning of the year, in March, I was on Fisher's Island at Lighthouse Works, which is a really great residency. So if there are any artists or writers here, highly recommend applying. So it's a remote island off the coast of Connecticut, but is in the jurisdiction of New York. So it's like a weird colonial sort of tax thing, tax and kings and stuff. But it was really cool being out there, and I was down there in off season. Fisher's Island has the population doubles during the summer seasons, and with that comes more workers to kind of work within the hospitality and tourism industry. So as at the supermarket or the market, it's a small market, And I was talking to the owner, and he was like, "Oh, your artist in residence, great." Da da da. It's like, "Are you from Jamaica?" It's like, "Yeah." It's like, "How do you know?" It's like, "Oh, we have a lot of Jamaican folks that come and work with us during the summers." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Tell me more." And so he goes on to say, well, they're like really nice folks. I'm in touch with a lot of them still. When they come here, they usually work really hard. That like stereotype of Jamaicans having a million jobs, they kind of fully embody that on the island. They like do gardening stuff in the morning, work in the supermarket in the day, and then run the bars at night. And so they kind of really hustle, and then the idea is that they would be packing things up to send things back home, probably in a barrel, to family members, and they kind of like hunker down and, and just work while they're there. Yeah. The supermarket owner, I think his name is Dan, was telling me, and a lot of them have started businesses when they go back home after a while, so there's this sort of economy that happens there. And so that, I got invited to make work here when I was on Fisher's Island. So I was thinking about that story and thinking about migration and labor, and thinking about also like the longing and the distance and what that sort of does to people who either can't leave where they're working, or are away from home for long distances. So yeah, that was sort of some of what I was thinking when I was kind of bringing this together. And the residency, being in that space, was definitely a part of, and understanding this place from being in a residency were definitely, the sort of parts of, helped me kind of realize this work. Yeah.
And both the videos and the sound have elements that you recorded at Fisher's Island. Do you want to talk a little bit about those? Because those are new videos that haven't been, you've not shown those in barrels before. It's different than what was previously kind of
right.
What
Yes.
you were viewing. So
yeah, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, so there's a sound that you hear that is like this boom, boom, that is sort of has this omnipresence on Fisher's Island, which is the buoys that are surrounding the island. You kind of hear them, and there's a haunting sort of quality to the song, especially like if you're riding back on a bicycle from a studio at midnight. It's foggy, it's like extra haunted. So that song really stayed with me even after I left the island. You just hear it. And then the video inside, I recorded some footage while I was there of the horizon line pointing towards towards the Caribbean, where my studio was. There, people would often kind of walk up and like kind of look out to the sea, and it was usually people waiting on the ferry, and those people were usually workers who were like day workers that would be coming in. And so I was able to just kind of, imagine and respond to that sort of idea of distance and longing through, the experience of just being there. And then the video that's in color is actually a live feed from Fisher's Island. So there is a camera that is facing out towards out to the ocean that is in this barrel. So it's sort of like looking out from one island into another one, which I kind of liked the idea of that, and sort of, the sea as a symbol of longing and distance and vastness, and yeah.
Yeah, it really makes you consider the sea as a vessel and what the sea is holding, and especially in relation to your work and practice, what it's holding for you in your experience and the African diaspora of the Caribbean as well. So I think it just beautifully kind of evokes that when you look through the barrel, and then you're kind of, it's as if you're like piercing through these walls and this environment, and just like getting that sight line and knowing that it's looking out in the Caribbean. It's very powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I also just enjoy seeing like a sailboat go by and people on the rocks, and sunset is especially gorgeous. So hopefully we'll catch some golden hour after the talk.
Thank you. No questions? Concerns?
Was your choice of materials in terms of neoprene and like graphic materials and neoprene, was it related to your experience as a surfer? And well, I feel like you kind of said that. But sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, yes, the neoprene was, I was thinking about, and I typically do this in my work, to figure out ways to work with water without, tell me we're talking about water without telling me we're talking about water. Like, how do you show water without showing water? Like, where is the poetry in the materiality of things, and like, how can we evoke that feeling of water without, showing it necessarily? I think poetry, I've been getting into poetry since I've been making work, because I like the slipperiness of language, and like, I think whenever in poetry, and I think whenever I can make it work materially, that's something that like I try and do, to try and kind of have some sort of slipperiness, openness, fugitivity to the materials, that they can open to do other things that they're expected to do, So the neoprene was, for example, it was soft to the touch, which is sort of inviting, and we also had like a bodily feeling because it kind of pushes back. And thinking about surfing and just like how I could bring like the thing that I was obsessed with into like my work, pretty much.
And were you cutting like yarn into neoprene or like, you weren't like recycled?
No, that would have been cool. That's a good idea. Maybe that will. I'm still exactly. That's a amazing. Thank you. But yeah, it was yardage of neoprene. But yeah, thank you. It's a good one. I owe that one to the Killer Brown, if you see it out there. Yeah.
I'm just curious if there's any significance to the fact that only one person at a time can kind of engage with one of the pillars at a time. Mm-hmm. And then also if you thought about like how the bodies were going to move around the pillars. I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to create an intimate feeling and like sort of create sort of interiority, a moment of interiority. It's like, how do you kind of show longing and desire, and like that feels like something that's very sort of singular and like interior. So that's why I could have done a bigger opening, so multiple people, but I think there's something special about being able to be with people and kind of experiencing it together, but on your own also. And then what was the other question?
Just the way people kind of practice thread around.
Yeah, the way the portals are sort of placed are considered to like how the body would move around it, and different bodies and different abilities and ages of bodies. Like that's why not all of them are on shipping pallets. If you're in a wheelchair, that might be difficult to get to. Or if you're a little small person, there are lower ones. If there's one that is sort of directly at my eye level, which is like mine sort of thing. But yeah, otherwise they're considered to other people, and like how, because Governor's Island, this is like a super special place in that like all kinds of people come here, and it's like you can hang out for free. There are no cars, there are trees, and if you live in New York, if you're a New Yorker, I've been here like for like over 20 years, you know how precious this sort of space is. And like, I feel like, yeah, lots of Jamaican people, Caribbean people always out here like in the grass, walking around, people learning to ride bicycles, stuff like that. So
Ian learned to ride a bicycle.
Ah.
One of our LMCC colleagues learned right out there.
Yeah, it's special like that. So I wanted to consider all of the people who come here and like that they could have an experience and that it wasn't sort of, that it was accessible to everyone, like the island is,
And you really did kind of get in here and try to feel it out. Like when we were just sort of planning and thinking about how many barrels are there going to be, how many portals are there going to be. And on my end, it was very practical, like how many screens do we need? But like you were really in here kind of like trying to anticipate how bodies would be in here moving. And when you set it up, it was just like, yes, like it feels, there's this like stability to it, the way it's laid out. And then there's like a way of threading. You really do thread through. Whenever I'm giving tours, I always kind of use that language. Like,
yeah, no, that's cool. Yeah, I was working with Gabrielle Francis, who's here, who's also an amazing artist. And we're at very different heights. And so that was kind of nice to be working with someone who would we could test out what it would feel like, to how does it feel to kind of tiptoe up or to crouch down or to how does it, think about how your body would move around the space. Yeah. So I thank you so much for being here and helping it. Yeah. So.
There's a phrase I love that one of my friends kind of coined. It's rewards for close looking. And I think this installation is really a reward for close looking.
I like that. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, cool. Have to steal that. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
How many questions we want with thought, right? So like these barrels are shipped to and from by the water, right? And so while these are portals leading in, it's almost like an inverted portal of whatever you're shipping. If this is like what they're looking out at, and I think there's just like this beautiful duality to inside being filled with water in this exhibition piece, but when they're being used practically, it's like that's what they're looking at on the outside. So just like a note of sitting here looking at them and hearing you talk, like there's this duality to the piece that you're carrying, and I know you're talking about immigration, migrants, and it's like there's just so much layers to it. So I'm like looking at this postcard, and I'm like, this could be looking in and looking out at the same time. So it's that like layers to it. So just noting that.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, totally. One of the best things about showing work is being able to get, how other people are experiencing it, and making these connections that like maybe I didn't make or didn't intend, but totally makes sense and totally need to write that down. I feel, it's really the work has been people have been generous with their sort of feedback and thoughts and their experiences around home and being away from home and their experiences with whether there's a phenomenon called barrel children where people like that too much to go into know, but like people who are left behind at home and like how that sort of form of care, the only form of care they're able to receive is from these barrels, and that their parents are able to send back, and there's also the side of the longing of people I know and who I've worked with who haven't been back to where they're from for decades, and have families, have husbands, have wives, have partners, have children, and so I think a lot about that also, and that experience. It's a sidetrack, but yeah.
No, absolutely, and it's been very cool as we've had the installation up and open to the public to see different reactions to the barrels, and sometimes someone might be exactly what you described, someone whose parents were working and sending them home, and to see the kind of recognition that this is a familiar object, and then the discovery of the way that you're using it is fascinating. And then for people who are totally uninitiated and have no idea what it is, to see them learn and like connect the dots, like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, wow, that's really cool. Has just been really wonderful.
Yeah, something I like about it also is this sort of idea of wonder, which is like this sort of sense of wonder when some people look in, which is when I showed it in Haiti for the first time, it was really popular with the kids in the neighborhood, and it was, you know, that was one of the things that made me want to kind of keep going with it. It was just that it could do that. It was interesting. Yeah.
Well, we are just about at time, so thank you all so much for being here. And another round of applause. You can actually put them right here, and we have some Global Forever stamps, so you can literally send it anywhere in the world. I know, that's how or you can keep it for yourself. It is an original artist object, edition of 300.
I can get Thanks for coming out, everyone. Bye.